Senate Bill 348 by Senator Galgiani, an act relating to environmental quality.
Senator Galgiani.
Thank you, Madam President and members. SB 348 would extend the authority of the California PUC over rail crossing closures in California, allowing them to continue to close dangerous at-grade crossings without adverse consequences to the purposes and provisions of CEQA. In the 2011 and 12 legislative session, the legislature adopted my bill, AB 1665, which instituted a standalone CEQA exemption affirming the CPUC's long-standing authority to close unsafe at-grade rail crossings without an EIR. The new CEQA exemption is set to sunset on January 1st of 2016 if no legislative action is taken. It is necessary to extend the sunset date for the exemption in order to ensure that any unsafe undercross or overcross is able to be closed properly after deliberations concluded at the CPUC. A number of fatalities occur every year in California at existing at-grade rail crossings, and there were 29 deaths in 2014 alone. This legislation will help ensure that dangerous crossings can be closed with simple and minor modifications without delay. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Galgiani. Any debate or discussion on this item? Any debate or discussion? Seeing and hearing none, is there any objection to substituting a unanimous roll call? Seeing and hearing none, ayes 35, no 0. That measure passes. File item 27, Senator Wolk. Pass on file. File item 28, Senator Block. Senator Block, file item 28. Pass on file. File item 29, Senator Vidak. Pass on file. File item 30, Senator Hueso, not at his desk. File item 31, Senator Wolk. Mr. Secretary, please read.
Senate Bill 7 by Senator Wolk, an act relating to housing.
Senator Wolk.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, SB 7 will authorize the Department of Housing and Community Development to develop and propose standards for individual water meters called water submeters in each apartment unit in newly constructed housing or apartment housing. These standards would then be adopted by the California Building Standards Commission during the next regularly scheduled adoption cycle. Unlike water meters for individual homes, there is no requirement in state law that individual dwelling units in apartment buildings have individual meters or submeters. SB 7 is supported by the U.S. Green Building Council, the California Municipal Utilities Association, the Santa Clara Valley Water District, and the Sierra Club. Thus far, it's had bipartisan support. I ask for your aye vote.
Debate or discussion on this item? Is there any debate or discussion? Seeing and hearing none, Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen. Aye. Anderson. Bates. Aye. Bell. Aye. Berryhill. Block. Aye. Canella. Aye. De Leon. Aye. Fuller. No. Gaines. Aye. Galgiani. Aye. Hall. Aye. Hancock. Hernandez. Aye. Hertzberg. Aye. Hill. Aye. Hueso. Aye. Huff. Aye. Jackson.
Aye.
Aye. Lada. Leno. Aye. Leyva. Aye. Liu. Aye. McGuire. Aye. Mendoza. Aye. Mitchell. Aye. Monning. Aye. Morlock. Aye. Morrell. Wynn. Aye. Nielsen. No. Pan. Aye. Pavley. Roth. Aye. Runner. No. Stone. Vidak. Wachowski. Aye. Wolk. Wolk, aye. Anderson, no.
Please call the absent members.
Berryhill. Hancock. Lada. Morrell. No. Pavley. Stone. No. Vidak. No.
Ayes 28, no 7. That measure passes. File item 32, Senator Monning. Mr. Secretary, please read. File item 32, colleagues.
Senate Bill 489 by Senator Monning, an act relating to hazardous waste.
Senator Monning.
Thank you, Madam President and members. Senate Bill 489 authorizes the Department of Toxic Substances Control to designate photovoltaic modules classified as hazardous to be designated as universal waste for purposes of its regulations and proper waste management. A universal waste designation provides flexibility to develop more effective and cost-efficient methods of handling PV modules, commonly known as solar panels. SB 489 is supported by the solar industry, waste management groups, and others who all share the goal that solar panel waste should be managed in a sustainable and responsible manner. Members, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Monning. Any debate or discussion on this item? Seeing and hearing none, is there any objection to substituting a unanimous roll call? Seeing and hearing none, ayes 35, no 0. That measure passes. File item 33, Senator Cannella. Mr. Secretary, please read.
Senate Bill 564 by Senator Cannella, enacting to vehicles.
Senator Cannella.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, this bill is a reintroduction of SB 1151 from last year, which passed both houses of the legislature unanimously. SB 564 is a bill that creates a $35 fine on traffic violations cited in school zones. The fine revenue will be designated for school zone safety projects under the Active Transportation Program. Directing the fine money to ATP provides a resource for projects that are vital for children's safety. This bill is co-sponsored by the Safe Routes to Schools National Partnership, supported by a number of other community organizations. SB 564 has received unanimous support in both the Senate Transportation and Appropriations Committee, and I ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Cannella. Any debate or discussion on this item? Any debate or discussion? Seeing and hearing none, is there any objection to substituting a There is. All right, Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen. Aye. Anderson. Bates. Aye. Bell. Aye. Berryhill. Block. Aye. Cannella. Aye. DeLeon. Aye. Fuller. Aye. Gaines. Aye. Galgioni. Aye. Hall. Aye. Hancock. Hernandez. Aye. Hertzberg. Aye. Hill. Aye. Hueso. Huff. Aye. Jackson.
Aye.
Aye. Lada. Leno. Aye. Leyva. Aye. Liu. Aye. McGuire. Aye. Mendoza. Aye. Mitchell. Aye. Monning. Aye. Morlock. No. Morrell. Aye. Wynn. Nilsson. Pan. Aye. Pavley. Roth. Aye. Runner. Stone. Aye. Vidak. Aye. Wachowski. Wolk. Wolk, aye. Anderson, no.
Please call the absent members.
Hueso, aye. Berryhill. Hancock. Lada. Wynn. Nilsson. Pavley. Runner. Aye. Wachowski.
Ayes 30, noes 2. That measure passes. File item 34. Senator Wachowski, are you planning to bring up file item, pass on file? File item 35, pass on file. File item 36, Senator Pan. Mr. Secretary, please read.
Senate Bill 292 by Senator Pan, enacting to public employees' retirement.
Senator Pan.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, SB 292 will clarify a conflict that currently exists between the traditional use of decades-old voter-approved pension tax levies and a requirement in the Public Employee Pension Reform Act, or PEPRA. These tax levies exist in 24 cities and 1 county. They were enacted by voters for the purpose of paying pension costs prior to the passage of Prop 13 in 1978. Even though Prop 13 limited property taxes, these pension levies were grandfathered under Prop 13. Traditionally, the levies have been used to pay the entire pension costs, including both the employer and the employee shares. PEPRA inadvertently created a conflict with these voter-approved levies by requiring new employees subject to PEPRA to pay an employee contribution of 50% of the actuarial normal cost of their respective pension plans. SB 292 resolves this conflict by creating exemption from the employee contribution requirement in the cities and county with these voter-approved levies. Finally, SB 292 does not prohibit the local employers from bargaining with their employees over contribution rates. These employers have always had and will continue to have under this bill the ability to bargain with their employees over employee contribution amounts. SB 292 simply creates an exemption from the PEPRA requirement in the matter of employee contributions, allowing these localities to retain the flexibility they have had for decades in funding their benefit costs. I respectfully ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pan. Is there any discussion or debate? Senator Murlock. Madam President, PEPRA was a good first start in addressing the pension concerns of this state, and I'm a little nervous about nibbling at the edges and making exceptions. So, Madam President, I believe that employees should be paying 50%, and I'll be opposed to this item.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion or debate? Seeing none, Mr. Secretary, please call the roll. I'm sorry. Senator Pan, would you like to close?
Just point out that that actually, without this bill, we may actually increase costs for these localities, because what happens is that these levies already exist. They've existed for decades, and so what happens is that by requiring the 50% employee match, that may actually then put upward pressures in terms of income and salary negotiations, while at the same time those cities and that one county actually have funds that they've already collected that are sitting that they can't use now for that purpose that could help them lower overall employee costs. So I respectfully ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Allen? Anderson? No. Bates? No. Bell? Aye. Berryhill? Block? Aye. Canella? Aye. De Leon? Aye. Fuller? No. Gaines? No. Galgiani? Aye. Hall? Aye. Hancock? Hernandez? Aye. Hertzberg? Aye. Hill? Aye. Hueso? Huff? Jackson? Lada? Leno? Aye. Leba? Aye. Liu? Aye. McGuire? Aye. Mendoza? Aye. Mitchell? Aye. Monning? Aye. Morlock? No. Morrell? No. Wynn? Nielsen? Pan? Aye. Pavley? Roth? Aye. Runner? No. Stone? No. Vidak? No. Wykowski? Aye. Wolk? Wolk, aye. Nielsen, no.
Please call the absent members.
Allen? Aye. Berryhill? Hancock? Hueso? Aye. Huff? Aye. Jackson? Aye. Lada? Aye. Wynn? Pavley?
Ayes 25, noes 10. The measure passes. Moving on to file item 37, Senate Bill 575. Senator Liu. Senator Liu. Secretary, please read.
Senate Bill 575 by Senator Liu, an act relating to insurance.
Senator Liu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I ask for your support in SB 575. This bill requires long-term care insurers to provide annual notification of the availability and amount of contingent benefits to the insured, and upon the insured designation, at least one other individual. I want to thank the Senate Insurance Committee and the Chair for working with me to develop the bill before you today. This legislation passed committee 7-0. This is part of the package of legislation recommended by the Senate Select Committee on Aging and Long-Term Care. Individuals who lapse their long-term care policies do not receive periodic notification from the insurer that these benefits are available. Without notification, these individuals and their families can easily lose track of the existence of benefits, especially if the insured suffers from cognitive impairment. These individuals and families likely end up paying for care or doing without when in fact benefits are available. This notification will give seniors and their loved ones a clearer understanding of benefits available to help finance and provide long-term care. This bill is sponsored by the California Department of Insurance. There's no opposition, and I ask for your support on the bill.
Thank you, Senator Liu. Any discussion or debate? Any discussion or debate? Senator Gaines.
Yes, I just wanted to thank the senator for bringing this. Thank you, Madam President and members, excuse me. But I just wanted to thank the author for bringing this forward. It provides clarity to the consumer so that they know what the benefits are, and there's communication between the insurance carrier and the insured. I urge an aye vote.
Any further discussion or debate? Seeing none, is there any objection to the use of a previous unanimous roll call? Seeing none, ayes 36, no 0, the measure passes. File item 38, Senate Bill 770, Senator Mendoza. Mr. Secretary, please read.
Senate Bill 770 by Senator Mendoza, an act relating to commercial feed.
Senator Mendoza.
Thank you, Madam President. Senators, I'm here to present SB 770 that ensures that the California Department of Food and Ag will continue to oversee the manufacture and use of medicated feed in California, regardless of which agency regulates the medicated feed on the federal level. Federal and state legislation is currently being proposed that will change the status of certain drugs used in medicated feed from over-the-counter to prescription. This change in status will shift the oversight of the formerly over-the-counter drugs from the CDFA to the California State Board of Pharmacy. If this change occurs, a situation will arise wherein feed manufacturers could be subjected to inspection by two different agencies. SB 770 will retain inspection oversight and regulation of feed mills within CDFA and is supported by a long list of agricultural and farming groups. This bill received unanimous support in Policy Committee, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion or debate? Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, is there any objection to the use of a previous roll call? Seeing none, ayes 36, no 0, the measure passes. Senator Jackson, for what purpose do you rise?
Could we go back to file item 16 with permission?
Absolutely. File item 16, Senate Bill number 142. Senator Jackson, Mr. Secretary, please read.
Senate Bill 142 by Senator Jackson, an act relating to civil law.
Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Madam President and colleagues. Colleagues, I'd like you to envision one of the probably few days in your lives as members of the Senate, but let's assume it's a Sunday morning and you're sitting out in your backyard or on your porch or on your balcony enjoying a cup of coffee with your family, or you are enjoying the coffee and watching your children playing in your yard. Imagine a drone coming from around the corner in your backyard at a distance of perhaps 15 or 20 feet away from you, looking eyeball to eyeball at you and recording your conversation, and then turning around and leaving. Now, if this sounds far-fetched, I can tell you this happened to me only a few months ago. And I have discovered since introducing this bill that it has happened to many people. And so I bring you Senate Bill 142, which will simply prohibit the use of unmanned aerial vehicles, also known as drones, in the airspace above your property without your permission. Now, existing law protects the privacy of California residents in their homes, both by prohibiting others from entering onto their land without permission and by prohibiting others from capturing images or recordings of personal or familial activities in situations where you might have a reasonable expectation of privacy, such as inside your house or in a secluded part of your backyard. This bill simply clarifies how these long-standing principles of trespass and privacy are going to apply to unmanned aircraft. We know drones have a potentially useful and extremely innovative purpose, but invading our privacy and our property without our permission should not be among them. When we're in our backyards with our families, we have an expectation that we have a right of privacy, just as I cannot walk into your backyard without your permission. I shouldn't be able to fly my drone in your backyard while you're enjoying the outdoors with your family. Similarly, I shouldn't be able to fly my camera-equipped drone up to your living room window and record what's going on in your house and expect that I'm not invading your privacy. And these are circumstances which have occurred and are occurring at greater numbers going forward. This isn't an issue just for homeowners. The proliferation of unmanned aerial vehicles has raised questions from the American Chemistry Council about security threats to critical infrastructure, such as the chemical plants, refineries, and electricity generating facilities. Just this week, in fact, the Golden Gate Transit Authority expressed concern with flying drones over the privately owned Golden Gate Bridge. The drones have been flying past security fences and sensors into areas where photography is actually prohibited. And one of these machines recently crash landed into the bridge. Many of these non-commercial drones as well, these toys, if you will, that people can buy on Amazon for a couple $100s, are also very difficult to fly, and they have been known to crash. In fact, one crashed into the White House the day before, a day after I brought my bill. They also have rotary engines that can decapitate someone if that were to happen. So these are not simple, innocuous beings. These are potentially dangerous and hazardous items. This bill clarifies and reinforces California's existing law on trespass and physical invasion in two important ways. First, it clarifies that trespassing includes entering onto someone else's land with a drone. And secondly, it clarifies that physical invasion of privacy, which is entering onto someone else's land to record their private activities without their permission, includes entry by drones used to record those activities. Now, there has been some question about federal preemption. Federal law regulates over 450 feet. This bill regulates from 350 feet down into airspace that the state of California that is part of your privacy right. This measure really addresses the uncertainty that exists in today's world. And the notion, I've had so many people say, you mean they can do that now? And the answer is yes, they can. There is no law prohibiting this. Simply by saying we're not going to allow drones to do this going forward is just simply applying the civil law of trespass to flying a drone over your property with the intent to photograph it and to otherwise violate your privacy. With that, I would urge your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. Any discussion or debate? Senator Gaines.
Yeah, Madam Chair and members, if I could ask a question to the President.
Are you open to a question?
No objection.
Go ahead.
Could you just provide clarification in the event of law enforcement? Could law enforcement still go through the necessary steps that they
Yes.
need to in order to satisfy their, perform their duties?
Yes, law enforcement, if it's hot pursuit, the way they could perhaps go through someone's property in hot pursuit, this does not preclude them from doing this as well. What this simply does is it takes the existing law, the civil law of invasion of privacy and trespass, and applies it to drones. That's it. That's what this bill does.
Wonderful. On my own time, I rise in support of this legislation. I'm very concerned about our privacy rights, and I think the technology is getting ahead of the law. This helps clarify that in terms of what our rights are from a privacy perspective. I'd urge that I vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Huff.
A question of the author, Madam President.
Without objection.
Without objection.
Senator?
So, Senator Jackson, you and I have had discussions on this, and I think we do need to get our arms around this emerging technology to the degree that it hits us in areas in our own lives and invades privacy. But is there anything in this bill that relates to video on drones, or is it just all drones?
Well, this applies to video. The law requires that this is being done to capture any type of visual image, sound recording, or other physical impression of the individual whose privacy is being invaded. So in other words, if you fly over someone's house, but there's no videoing going on, or you're not intending to video, then you aren't violating this civil provision.
Does it hits drones other than those that are carrying video cameras also? In other words, there's some drones that aren't outfitted with anything. You just fly them around like a little toy helicopter. But does it would limit those as well from flying over anybody else's property?
Well, at this point, we're dealing with taking images. So if a drone is theoretically flying and somehow inadvertently flies over your property within 350 feet, it has no item on it to memorialize your behavior, it would not be included in this bill.
Okay. Thank you.
However, that might be a thought. But again, this is the invasion of privacy. There will be, I'm sure, by way of close.
We have another
Oh, I'm sorry.
question. Senator Nielsen.
Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, if I may, another question of the author.
Without objection.
I'm very popular today,
Well,
Senator Nielsen.
Yes, I read the language, and I don't see any exemption related to law enforcement's so-called hot pursuit. Is that, and I don't see a reference to another section of the codes.
This is not, that was by way of illustration. This is a bill that simply says if you are flying an unmanned aerial vehicle over someone's property without their permission. So if you're a police department, this is not going to affect you to the extent that you still have to do what you've always done if you're going to go into someone's property. As a police officer, you need to if you're going to go into someone's property, you have to get a probable cause warrant, unless you're in hot pursuit. And that's the analogy I've drawn here. If you have an individual, and that's what we're focusing on here, is the non-criminal use of drones, or the non-police officer use of drones. This is about individuals who are, it's like your neighbor. Your neighbor decides they want to see what you're doing. They jump the fence and they come into your yard. If they're jumping the fence and they're coming into your yard without your permission, they are committing a civil trespass. That's what this bill is designed to deal with.
And I am passionately in support of that, Senator, but I still have reservations about constraining law enforcement in any way. I will need to have that clarified before I can be a yes vote.
We'll ask the senator to address that in her closing. Senator Nielsen. Senator Fuller.
Question of the author.
Without objection, Senator Jackson?
Without objection.
I'm looking at the bill as it's printed up, and I don't see any numbered language about taking images or cameras. Do I have the wrong bill, or is there a line number that you can cite to me?
The penalty for this is the ability of an individual to bring an action for damages. But you aren't going to get damages unless you can show harm. The harm is the invasion of your privacy. Flying an unmanned vehicle over your house where there's no imaging being taken is not an example of harm. So as a practical matter, you're not going to bring any action, there's not going to be any enforcement unless your privacy has been violated. That's the reference that I am making here. There is, if you look at the provisions on trespass, you have to show that there has been some harm to the individual who has been trespassed upon. That's the explanation, that's the referencing to the various code sections. You have to show, there has to be, you can bring an action if you can show harm. Without the photography, without the invasion of the privacy, there is no harm.
Well, this bill that we're voting on actually doesn't have anything about the enforcement. It just says, operates an unmanned vehicle below the navigable airspace, 350 feet, operates an unmanned aerial vehicle below the navigable airspace underlying the property, and it doesn't specify that I mean, from this bill, I just can't tell that it has anything at all to do with what the harm is. It sounds like from this bill that if it operates above an unmanned, aerial vehicle below the navigable airspace, 350 feet or above ground level, that's a problem. And in my area, that's a big problem. I mean, I'm against cameras flying in your backyard, but I can't find anything in the bill that references that.
Well, if you look at lines 9 through 14, it says, a person wrongfully occupies real property and is liable for damages.
Without permission, if he
Pursuant
or
to
she
Section
does
3334.
either of the following: operates an unmanned aerial vehicle below such and such, or operates an unmanned aerial vehicle less than 350 feet above the ground.
My colleague, the law professor, has stated it more succinctly than I could. Very simply, you can't sue for trespass unless you have damages. You don't have damages unless there is an invasion of your privacy. There is an invasion of your privacy if someone is photographing you or otherwise capturing your information or your image.
Okay, well, I'm not a law professor, and I never planned to be. But as I read this bill, I am not able to vote for it at this time on the basis that it sounds to me like operating an unmanned vehicle could be construed as the damages that people are asking for. It may be in current law that the damages are specified as it must be photography, or it must be like if it crashes into the ground and hits you. And if it is specified in law that people cannot trespass on your land and take a picture of you in any way, or if someone hits you, with a drone, then we don't need the bill. If it's not, then I can't vote for it. So I thank you. I hope that this gets clarified in a way that is easy to understand and interpret and does not take a law professor to do so. But thank you.
Senator Huff.
Thank you, Madam President. Having read the bill after my previous questions of the author and was highlighted by the previous speaker, I rise to oppose this bill. I think the bill that Senator Jackson was describing is one I would love to support, one that would ban video cameras or some video imaging, but what this bill talks about is drones. And so if I have a drone fly over my fence and I feel violated, then I can take it to an attorney. And from what I'm reading here, I could prove damages because I suffered trauma because I thought it might have taken images of me or something along those lines. And this bill would enable that. So it may not take a law professor, but it certainly give rise to attorneys to make a lot of decisions when we have the ability to narrow this to a point that's very succinct and captures what I believe the author is trying to do. So until we have that bill to vote for, I would urge a no vote on this one.
Any further discussion or debate? Senator Morlock.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a question myself.
Without objection.
Excuse me, sir, is that a question of the author?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Goes to the presiding
May I
officer.
request a question of the author?
Any objection, Senator Jackson?
Not to my good friend who just backpacked in my county.
Okay, great. Proceed, sir.
Beautiful Los Padres National Forest.
Thank you.
I just concluded serving on the Orange County Vector Control Board, and the utilization of drones to go over backyards to look for pools that are being ignored is an idea that's being considered. Is there any exceptions provided for government agencies that are trying to fulfill a public function?
Well, not at this point, but this doesn't refer to government agencies. You know, one of the things with drones that this bill doesn't address is the police powers use of drones. That's another bill. This bill is just designed to address neighbors and others who otherwise might be referred to as peeping Toms to come in. I don't think a vector agency would want to or consider itself a peeping Tom. This is strictly for individual use, for whatever purpose, someone who decides they're going to jump the fence and peer in your window and photograph or video what's going on in your yard in violation of your right of privacy.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Madam President.
Yeah, what is?
Any further discussion or debate? Seeing none, Senator Jackson, would you like to close?
I would be delighted. And recognizing that there are not a whole lot of lawyers in this room, but that we are making the laws for this state, which have to be enforced frequently by lawyers or the police or others or individuals. I would just simply like to say that in order to obtain damages, you have to meet certain requirements. This would be operating an unmanned aerial vehicle less than 350 feet above the ground level within the airspace overlaying the real property of another person without their permission. In order to capture any type of visual image, sound recording, or other physical impression of the plaintiff, engaging in private, personal, and familial activity, and the invasion occurs in a manner that is offensive to a reasonable person. We are simply amending an existing law that sets those criteria. So if you would like to refer to the sections that are referred to in this bill, that's what this bill tells you. This is a very limited adjustment to existing law, as I've articulated. I don't know what more to say other than you don't have to be a rocket scientist or an attorney to recognize the importance of this legislation. And if you take a look at the sections referred to in these two paragraphs, you will see that that is what is being considered. So with that, I think that this is a very small but important step on balancing the importance of drones and the importance of our privacy as we go forward in the world today. And with that, I would ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen. Aye. Anderson. No. Bates. Aye. Bell. Berryhill. Block. Aye. Cannella. De Leon. Aye. Fuller. No. Gaines. Aye. Galgiani. Hall. Hancock. Hernandez. Aye. Hertzberg. Aye. Hill. Hueso. Huff. No. Jackson. Aye. Lada. Aye. Leno. Aye. Leyva. Aye. Liu. Aye. McGuire. Aye. Mendoza. Aye. Mitchell. Aye. Monning. Aye. Morlock. Morrell. No. Wynn. Aye. Nilsson. Pan. Aye. Pavley. Roth. Aye. Runner. No. Stone. Vidak. No. Wykowski. Aye. Wolk. Nielsen, no.
Please call the absent members.
Bell. Aye. Berryhill. Cannella. Galgiani. Hall. Aye. Hancock. Hill. Aye. Hueso. Aye. Morlock. Pavley. Stone. No. Wolk. Morlock. No.
Ayes 24, noes 9. The measure passes. Moving on to Assembly third reading, file item 42, ACR 31. Senator Galgiani. Mr. Secretary, please read.
Assembly Concurrent Resolution 31 by Assemblymember Perea relative to California Agriculture Day.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, ACR 31 honors California Agriculture Day, a day of celebration commemorating agriculture's vital role in keeping Californians nourished. The theme of 2015 California Ag Day is California Breaking New Ground. Today's ag industry offers many career opportunities from on-farm cultivation to food science and engineering. California has been the largest ag state in the country for the last 6 decades. The value of 2012 production was over $42 billion. There are more than 80,000 farms and ranches in California producing more than 400 commodities. 79% of farms are individual or family owned. On average, more than 20% of California ag production is exported. The value of exports in 2012 was $18.8 billion. California is the only state to export olives, almonds, pistachios, and raisins. On Wednesday, March 18th, California agriculture was on display on the west steps of the Capitol, and I would like to thank those of you who were able to join us. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Any discussion or debate? Senator Stone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to support this today. Agriculture is a $4 billion industry in Riverside County with produce in the Coachella Valley, certainly in our wine country, and so I strongly support this.
Any further discussion or debate? Senator Galgiani?
For your aye vote.
Thank you. Is there any objection to the use of a previous unanimous roll call? Hearing and seeing none, ayes 35, no 0. The resolution is adopted. Moving on to consent calendar, items 50 through 53. Mr. Secretary, please read.
Senate Bill 187, 327, 374, and Senate Bill 650.
Is there any objection to the use of a previous unanimous roll call? Seeing none, ayes 35, no 0. Consent calendar is adopted. Returning to motions and resolutions. Are there any members who wish to be recognized? This is your opportunity to adjourn in memory. Seeing none, if there's no further business, Senator De Leon, the desk is clear.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, we will reconvene our floor session Thursday at 9 a.m.
Thank you very much. With that, the Senate will stand adjourned. We will reconvene Thursday at 9 a.m.